To me, Jesus is my brother, in the sense of we as baptized Christians, at the time of baptism, become grafted onto Him. We become a part of Him. And I've come to learn, that as I become His brother, as I become a part of Him, as St. Paul says, that I need to be worthy of that, of being a part of His body. And so what I find in my day-to-day life is He's my guide, He's my brother, He's my older brother. He takes me through every day, giving me opportunities to redeem myself, opportunities to find myself, opportunities to heal my brokenness. And the only person I can trust to eventually find answers for me is Christ. So yes, He's my Lord and Savior, He's all that, but I find those words somehow to be very cliched. If I think of Him more as a person who is there every day, every minute of my life, guiding me in everything I do, looking out for me, that's my relationship with Him, I feel. I was born in Kerala. I was there for maybe a week or so. I don't really even know. And we flew, I think we left for Chennai, and my family raised me there. My father would teach me that I belonged to the Syro-Malankara Syrian Catholic rite. But we barely had a chance to go to the church. It was quite far away from our home in Chennai. So we would go once in a while. But most of the time we'd go to the Roman Catholic church that was nearby. So I grew up with going to Sunday Mass. I was an altar boy when I was younger for a few years of my life. And catechism was something that you did once in a while. The church that I went to, the father used to say, yeah, you should come for catechism and so on, but one thing or the other, I'd either show up or not show up. It was not very regular. I was very short. It was like a few weeks, and I had my first Holy Communion. So all along after, in these years, this is probably when I was 9 or 10, you did get a sense of right and wrong. Your parents did tell you what was what, and it was the basics. But then it was more routine. It was not really a deep sense of faith, or it was just something you did. It was part of your routine for the week and for your Sunday. I was an average kid. There's nothing extraordinary about my childhood. When I was in college, I was living in the Catholic hostel in Trivandrum. We would, I think I got into all kinds of trouble. And at that point in time, my uncle was actually the Monsignor Syro-Malankara rite in Trivandrum. And so there was this additional shame that, me as, and he was my local guardian at that point, me as the nephew of the Monsignor had gotten into trouble. And the warden actually called him and brought him to the hostel and said, here, look, this is what he has done. But something happened in me at that point. This was towards my final year. Something happened, and I don't know if it was to get into the good books of the warden, which I think was definitely an intent. I started going for morning mass every day. There was a chapel in the hostel, and I started going for morning mass. But something happened. I would go for morning mass, and then late at night I would go for the rosary that we would do at the end of the day. I felt like I was having maybe an experience of faith which I cannot explain. I cannot even recall it right now, but it was strange. It changed it changed everything. It changed how I was dealing with myself, with others, the kinds of trouble I would get into, the kinds of activities I would involve myself in. I stood for election in college, but I kind of withdrew from all that. I tried to do what was right, whatever right meant at that point. So I could say in some sense there was a little bit of an experience of returning to God at that time. It lasted that year until my final year. And I think somehow I managed to get into admission for my master's degree, and then I came back to Chennai. Then once I landed in Chennai, I was back to my old ways. I was again back to I'd still go to church, but at the same time I'd have all my bad habits come back. Maybe it was just a cursory relationship with the Lord at that point. And then I wrote my exams for going abroad. At about the same time, I also met my future wife. We got to know each other, and we would hang out. She would tell me about her family, and she would tell me about her father in particular, who was a very devout man. He was involved with the charismatic movement in Kerala. I think he was the Kerala State Vice Chair or something like that for the movement there for a long time. And I came to experience, just between what my wife would tell me and what I would see directly, this man who was very different. He had a outlook towards life that I can only call. There was a sense of calmness in him. Nothing ruffled him. Nothing. And that influenced me. Certainly his character influenced me. So I began to think, I said, what is it about this that keeps him calm like this? He came to know about the fact that we were both, interested in each other. We were going out together and so on. And then at about this time, I was getting ready to go abroad. They started to, tell me, we got hooked with my parents. I said, okay, you have to get married before you go. So we got married, and then I had a one-room apartment, which is where I had to get my wife. She moved there in September. She also got admission to the college that I was in. And we would go to church, we would do things together, and she, obviously having grown up with the influence of her father, was obviously a lot more devout than I was. So the years passed. We were just going to college. I was doing my PhD at that point. She was doing a master's. And in 1995, I was about 3 years into my being there, I finished my PhD. And in that last year, I decided to go for yet another degree. And I did another master's at that point. All through this, faith was just something that was on the side. After I graduated in 1997 with my second degree from there, I got a job immediately, started working, still just regular churchgoers, nothing unusual. 2000, our first baby was born. That was a big change in our lives. But even then, prayer was something you did. We didn't have regular prayer at home. We prayed when we remembered that we had to pray. The rosary was something that was almost done once in a while. Again, if we remembered to do it. But I remember this, that because of the influence of my father-in-law, I remember that even when our child was born, I had this faith in me that that I have to pray. That's all I knew, but not any deeper than that. So he had given us a prayer to pray over the child while she was still in Annie's womb, and we used to do that regularly. I remember we didn't miss a single day when we didn't do that. So we'd pray. I would hold my hand over her tummy, and we would pray over the child. And I feel that a lot of the blessedness that has come into her life is probably a result of that. We had our second child. That was in 2006. Even then, again, prayer is just something on the sidelines. We do these things. There is a certain amount of faith, but nothing life-changing, nothing deep, I would say. And then we met someone who we knew in college, and then there was a friend of ours, well, actually a friend of my father's from Chennai. His daughter and her husband had come down to the US. This was in 2007 or 2008. And she was very devout. She was in JY. She had found her faith, very deep faith. So she invited us to come to a prayer meeting. It was just in a home. They were also trying to get to know people. So we started this initial book called The Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren. We started doing it. I know it's not a Catholic book, but it was a book that we would read regularly. So we started to do this. We would read the book a chapter or two at a time and then pray. We'd meet in each other's homes. I wouldn't say there's much of a change, but there was information coming in from the perspectives that we had in the book. Then later, again in 2010, we came to know, we met up again with friends we always knew throughout that time, Pat and Juliet. So they began to invite us to prayer meetings in their home. Initially, it was a little far away, we wouldn't go, and so on and so forth. Then in 2010, Pat asked me this question. He says, he asked everybody this question. He says, can anyone substitute for me for adoration at a church that is pretty far away? Because he had to go in that December, he had to go come back to India for a visit. So he was not, it was a perpetual adoration where someone was there 24 hours a day, 365 days a year in front of the Blessed Sacrament. So he said I had to, so whoever would go had to take this 1 hour slot on Sunday morning at 6 o'clock. So nobody's answering and saying, taking the command. I said, sure, I'll go. I don't know why I said that, but I did. And then when he left, I started to go. I think that was the start of my change. Initially, I just went there. There was nobody in that chapel except an old woman who would sit in the back. She would come in around 4 o'clock and she would stay there till 7. And I would come in at 6 o'clock and stay till 7. And it was quite a drive. It was a few miles away. What I was told you could do was there were these index cards kept with people's petitions. So you could take the index cards, read it, and then you could pray. So you're essentially interceding for them. And I would do this regular. I would come every Sunday and do this and go back home. And initially there was really nothing. I did this, and then Pat came back with his family. And then he said, so how did it go? And I said, yeah, it was nice. I would go regularly. I didn't miss even a Sunday, I think. No, I did miss a couple of Sundays. But then when he came back, I asked him, can I continue to do that at that slot? And he graciously said, okay. He said, yeah, go ahead, you take that slot. We'll find another slot. So I started to go regularly every Sunday, 6 o'clock in the morning. I would be there till 7, for the rest of the time that I was there. At about the same time, Pat and Juliet started a Bible study class in their home. It was not a class so much as it was a group thing. We would, it was a thing that you would see on in a video, and then you would discuss things after that. So I'm going to the Adoration Chapel. Things are slowly changing for me. There's not a sea change. And I would start going for these Bible classes as a family. So one of the things you had to do for the Bible class was you had to read entire books of the Bible in preparation, and then you would go watch this video, and then there would be a discussion afterwards. So you had to commit to that, and it went for a whole year because it was a very long series. And we cover everything from the Old Testament all the way down to the New Testament, but not everything. It was enough of it to kind of give you a glimpse into what was salvation history. So we did that through that year, and after the first maybe 2 classes, for some reason, I started to think, oh, I'm maybe not getting enough out of it. Let me write down what I'm thinking as I read these passages. And I started to write. When I started to write papers and papers of material. I don't know where it came from, but I would write just reflections after reflections in there. I'm very introverted by nature. I was very shy to send it out. And that was one of my first things. It said, there's some voice in me that said, just send it out to the group. And I sent it out to the group, not expecting any feedback, but they all read it and they loved it. And they said, you have to write more. And I kept doing that, class after class I would do it, but I didn't do it that many times. I did it enough number of times, about 6 or 7 times. And I found that as I am writing, in order to write, I was also reading. And I started to read anything Catholic that came into my hands. Everything from Philokalia in the old, from the desert monks, Aquinas, Augustine, anything that came into my hands, I would start reading. And books would start coming to my hands that were somehow appropriate for that moment in my life. I would find answers through them. I would read so much that my wife would be annoyed with me about how much I was reading. And she would say, well, why are you reading so much? All it needs is faith. And I could never find an explanation for that, but I kept reading. I never stopped reading. To this day, I keep reading. One day in that process where I was in the church, during adoration like this, I was not reading. I usually take the Bible. This Bible, I had this with me. I had it with me. I was sitting there. I was somehow not very interested. I can't recall entirely what happened. Sitting there, that old lady who was normally there was not there. And there's this giant cross in that church with Christ's hands outstretched. It's not the crucified Christ, if I recall. He was standing there, and I looked at the cross and I started crying. I don't know why I cried, but it was continuous crying. Almost the entire time I was sitting there, I was crying. And I hear or imagine this voice telling me, and I don't remember the words anymore, but it was essentially saying, won't you do something for these least of my brethren? And I kept crying, and I said, I don't know what to do. And then this thought struck me about community and helping each other, and there was this idea because I was in IT, there was this idea that crossed my mind about how we could do something, as a project. All these things struck me, and then again, because I'm sometimes reluctant to take initiative, it just stayed that way. But this thought just kept coming back to me again and again and again. It's still there with me today, and haven't done anything about it, unfortunately. But that was my first experience of having gone through this sense of somehow some experience that's external to me. I don't know how. Nobody has guided me or told me that was an experience or it was a God experience. I don't know that. All I know is that I felt I was not alone, that there was something expected of me. I don't know what it was. Maybe half of it was my imagination, but there was something expected of me. But then our life also started to take a turn in a different way, because we were very comfortable. The job was there. I was doing very well at work. The kids were growing up fine. They were going to school. You can get very, very well settled in the US, and you can get very comfortable in what you're doing. So much so that you think that's all that matters. And God somehow knows to unseat you, I think. So at this time, what started to happen in our family was Annie's parents. Things started to happen in their home, where her mom is having all kinds of issues, and her health starts deteriorating. Her father's unable to cope with it. They're alone in Cochin. Annie is having to call and talk to her parents almost on a daily basis, trying to figure out what to do about these health issues and what they are struggling through. We keep trying to get them here. They came a few times, but they are not comfortable in the US. And then in 2012, things with her parents got really bad. The health conditions, because he was beginning to not able to walk even, so it was impossible for him to take full care of his wife. Her mom was not able to take care of him as much because of her own health issues. And there was nobody to take care of them. We were not finding help. In between, there was help in the house. That started to disappear. So it was clearly a sign that God was putting you was taking you out of your comfort zone. So you could either continue to ignore it, or you could do something about it. Everybody that we would talk to about this would tell us, if you go back, you're making a very, very bad decision. There is no way that your children will be able to adjust to it. Our younger one was 6 at that point. There's no way the children will be able to adjust to it, because especially the older one will not be able to adjust to it. And we had a good community going by this point. Our Bible study group had gotten really close to each other. We were having a lot of stuff going on. I was able to explain stuff and write stuff, and I was getting, I wouldn't say I was getting closer to the Lord, but I was getting to know the Lord and what He wanted or what He expected of a Christian much more. It was all surface knowledge. It's only later that I came to realize how much I had to really learn. Then in 2012, in May, I was telling my boss about some of the difficulties I was going through. And in May, for some reason, after a long time telling him about all this, he said, why don't you try going and living in India and working remotely from there? I couldn't believe my ears. That company in particular, where I was, working remotely, working from home was a no-no. You had to be in the office, and he was offering this. Somehow everything was working out. And then started this next phase in our life here in Bangalore. People began to invite us into the church, and we began to find in that same year, other people invited us to retreats over here. And I attended my first retreat ever. I'd never been to a retreat before. One of the things that highlighted that retreat was this verse from Revelations chapter 3, verse 15. I know your works. You are neither hot nor cold. And because you are neither hot nor cold, because you're lukewarm, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. The way he explained that, I came to this realization that that's what I am. That's what I've always been. A lukewarm Christian. Someone who, you go to church, you've got a certain amount of faith, but you're not committed. You're partially committed to that relationships. You're neither hot nor cold, as Christ says in that line. So that again began to bring about another change, because I began to think, it's not the writing or the reading that really matters. It's really how you change internally. And there again began yet another process of conversion for me, because I began to realize that there was a lot of pride in me. There was a lot of, with all this reading that I was doing, that I know a lot. There was that reflection about I know a lot. And I used to really, every opportunity I got, it was more the enjoyment of trying to talk about my knowledge that was driving me than applying it to myself. So that began to change with that retreat. And then I began to realize that, with all the, the unsurety that we had come here to, we began to realize that things were being taken care of every time I let go or gave up control over trying to control the situation. As soon as I let go of the situation, things worked out. Later in 2013, I lost that job. The job I came here on, my company got acquired. They couldn't handle having someone remote. So I lost that job. And then I began to worry now about what I was going to do next. But I began to think, I'm going to leave it to you, because those retreats helped. A month later, I found a job. And this was the other kind of thing, because I had this other experience at that point, which was very life-changing for me. I got 4 job offers. Well, actually, there were 4 opportunities, 3 job offers. And one was the opportunity that came to me while I was sitting in that adoration chapel. It said, go and do something about that website that you wanted to start. So I'm thinking about these 4 things in my mind, and I'm very unsure. What should I do at this point in life? So there's a father who was in Kerala, who was a very holy man, and he can discern for you. He does this thing about discerning for you. He's very well known. And so I thought, okay, well, I didn't really think, okay, can things like this even exist? Or someone like who can tell you what to do. So among these 3 job offers, there was one that I was very sure was the one that I was supposed to pick. It was not the one that I'm in right now. It was a different one. And I was very sure because it was close by, very famous company, stable, and I could continue to do things. I started teaching catechism at that point, so I could continue to do, and we were in choir by that point in church. So I could continue to do those things because it was close by, it wouldn't affect the schedule. Again, it was how I was thinking about it. I can control those things. So I said, I'm pretty sure that's the one that I have to pick. So I called Father and I said, I'm having trouble picking from these things. And initially, thinking of control, I was going to put only those 3 job offers on the list, because that 4th one I was very worried about. And so I kept reflecting on that. I kept praying on that. And I said, I can't be honest with myself if I don't put that fourth one on the list. So Father said, just put them, don't tell me what the jobs are. Don't tell me, just say 1, 2, 3, 4. You write down what those 1, 2, 3, 4 are. So 1 is the job 1, 2 is job 2, job 3, and the fourth one I picked was that thing that I wanted to do on my own. So I gave it to him, and he said, I called him at 9:30 at night. He said, call me same time the next night. And I'm at my most anxious end because I put that fourth thing in that list. I called him the next day. So number 1, remember, was this job that was close by. Number 2 was another job which I was pretty sure would be something I wouldn't be asked to do. Number 3 was my present job. And number 4, and by the way, that was the highest paying job. So, and number 4 was this opportunity which I was supposed to go do on my own. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, I think I know what the answer is going to be. I call him and he says, the first choice, this is what the Holy Spirit is telling him. The first choice is number 4. Remember, he doesn't know. He doesn't know what the jobs are. He doesn't know what it is. As soon as I hear number 4, I just jump off the chair. I literally jump off the chair thinking, what on earth? Because I'm not confident about it. I have no idea how I'll provide for my family because it's a crazy idea. Someday I'll explain it, but it's a crazy idea. And I talked to a few people about it, and they all said, there is no way you're going to make money out of this. So how am I going to provide for my family? And so I paused. And I said this in my mind, Acho, I don't know what to do. And he said at that point, there is a second choice. And it was the job that I'm in right now that I finally ended up picking. He said, you can't pick that second one. And it was one I was thinking I would not end up picking. And I just sat there and thinking, Lord, you are so kind. You understand how weak I am, that I'm not ready at the moment. And he said this to me at that time, which was why I was pretty sure that, nothing's ever going to be the same again. He said, in order to do that fourth one, you need a little more faith and a little more courage. If you have that, go for it. But it's your choice you have to make. And it's like everything else that I've done. I feel like that is what I'm supposed to do, but I still don't have that sufficient faith and courage in me to take that step. So we decided that I would go for that second option. I went for that second option. I have to say that my faith life has changed since then, continued to change, continued to deepen. I am more introspective about my faith life rather than trying to impress upon others how much I know. I started going to adoration again. Again, just how broken a person really is. St. Paul talks about earthen vessels, and I imagine myself as a broken earthen vessel that's been put back together, that's meant to hold his treasure. And I find myself constantly saying, I'm not worthy of that treasure. But that's what he calls you to, and he's so kind and gentle, he lets you do it in your time. But the times when he really wants you to step up, unless you let go, he cannot help you either. And so it's a combination of letting go continuously in your life, so that you let him take control, that he takes you through this journey. Every time I try to control an argument in the house, something that I want my child or my wife or anyone to do according to my whims or fancies, when I let go of that particular urge or need, somehow there is joy and peace in that. It's like how Jesus told us to be like little children, to be able to reach out. It's like how St. Teresa of Lisieux says about the little way. Rather than us trying to be all adult about it, the more I feel like I let go, the more I feel he takes care of all these issues for me.